1914 marked the beginning of World War I, and 1939 began World War II. This 25-year window is the time frame for this lecture. The turn of the century celebrated the Belle Epoque, a beautiful time when life seemed joyous and wonderful. The Industrial Revolution had brought remarkable advances. Prior to 1914, we saw the first flight by the Wright brothers, automobiles replaced horse-driven carriages, photography, and the first moving pictures and film, alongside the rapid innovations in communications, all transformed society. These technological advances transformed the strategies of World War I. Then they called it the war to end all wars because of its never-before-seen military capabilities. During this first global conflict, the wonderful innovations of the Industrial Revolution were then turned into unprecedented force of tanks, submarines, chemical warfare, mustard gas that killed countless soldiers who often were just simply trapped in trenches, never even had a chance to raise their weapons before they met their demise. The tactics were horrific. Young people watched their friends go off to war and die while their hometowns faced the threat of invasion. The world was gripped by political struggle and social challenges. A stark division emerged between the elite establishment and the working class. Ordinary farm workers and laborers were pulled into a conflict that they knew nothing about. In neutral Switzerland, particularly Zurich, artists responded to the madness unfolding in neighboring countries. Many found the situation absurd. They were meant to advance culture, yet that same culture had descended into senseless killing and bombing of innocent civilians. Their anger at this absurdity manifested in unique ways. In one famous story, artists were drinking at a cafe when a stray bullet shattered the window and struck a painting that had then fallen. Rather than taking cover, they raised their glasses in a toast and said cheers as they continued to party. This captured the spirit of the time, the zeitgeist, an acknowledgement that death could come to anyone at any moment. So one might as well embrace life's absurdity and reject the modern culture that had led them to such devastation. World War I ended, only to be followed by the Spanish flu of 1919, exactly 100 years before our own pandemic. Then came the Roaring Twenties, an era of tremendous growth and rebuilding. New York City's skyline was transformed with the tallest skyscrapers ever seen: the Empire State Building, the Chrysler Building, and the Woolworth Building. This was an era immortalized by the book The Great Gatsby, when fortunes were made overnight. Well, that was until the Wall Street crash of 1929. At the beginning of World War I, artists were saying, "It isn't a beautiful place anymore. We won't make pretty pictures because it's not a pretty world." Humans have a wonderful ability to create beautiful things. Lovely literature, wonderful music, great architecture, beautiful fashion, dance, ballet, orchestras, symphonies, all fantastic. But we also have the ability to create horrible killing machines. There's an awkward balance here, and Duchamp pointed out this nonsensical nature of how things can be. It's a break with logic. We think that we grow and develop to become better humans, but we're just better at hurting each other. They saw something absurd about the world around them and tried to communicate back to everyone. If you're all doing really absurd things, well, we as artists are also going to do really absurd things to make you think about what this all means. This idea of absurdity, of nonsense, was, well, the retinal artists saying that their role was just to make pretty pictures. Should artists merely use bright colors that dance in your eyes and say, "Look at how pretty I am"? Many became suspicious of this superficial idea that influenced us to see beauty in the world, well, in a world that wasn't beautiful. Where should we focus our attention when looking at art or when looking at things in the world? Should we accept things at face value as pretty pictures, or should we question them, see them from different perspectives, and point out their absurdities? Or perhaps we should embrace what we find genuinely good. This is what I encourage all of you to do in this class. I'm highlighting Duchamp because his influence is similar to that of Brunelleschi's development of linear perspective. Both artists created something through their creative process that had a lasting impact on countless artists who followed them. Marcel Duchamp was a major figure in the Dada movement, where artists gathered together under a deliberately silly name. There are many theories about how they chose this name. One says that the artist threw a dart at a dictionary and it landed on the word Dada. In French, that means hobby horse, like a child rocking back and forth. Duchamp worked along with other artists doing Cubism and other styles, Futurism, for example. In 1912, shortly before World War I, he made a claim that he would make the last painting that anyone ever needed to make, saying, "I am the future." So he created this painting called Nude Descending a Staircase. So there's so much to discuss here about this work in relationship to our previous conversations about nude figures in museums. But let's focus this idea of pushing it forward and not leaning on the past. This was his point of departure. During this transition, he criticized other artists, saying they were only interested in retinal flutter, making bright, pretty pictures and reflective surfaces that dance in your eye, but they all remain superficial. There's no meaning there, he argued. It doesn't reflect real life or the reality of fearing bomb attacks. So he thought there was a disconnect between viewing pretty things in museums while terrible events unfolded outside. One of his most famous works, representing a huge shift in art, came after he moved to New York due to the chaos that was happening in Europe. When asked to create a sculpture for an exhibition, he took a urinal, flipped it upside down, signed it with someone else's name, and dated it like a proper artist would do with the title Fountain. That's what he named the artwork. This introduced the concept of the ready-made, or the found object, taking something someone else made and repurposing it. While we're familiar with repurposing today, back then they called it a ready-made or a found object. He presented it as a sculptural object and well-crafted, but given a different context in an art gallery. While there's humor and irony in calling a urinal a fountain, it primarily points out to life's absurdity. He also played with absurdity by critiquing cultural icons through ready-mades. For instance, he took the Mona Lisa and labeled it Elle ha au cul. When pronounced in French, it sounds like he's saying, "She's got a hot ass." He added a mustache to the Mona Lisa. It's absurd because he's poking fun at this genius we elevate as a spectacular representation of culture, reducing it, through his artwork, to a crude joke. Just to give a brief overview of other examples of his work, here's somewhat of a greatest hits of Duchamp's work, where he, for example, places a bicycle wheel on a chair, he turns a bottle drying rack upside down into a sculpture, he creates the fountain, and there's so many other examples that embrace his nonsense and absurdity. Francis Picabia and Duchamp collaborated as Dada artists. Picabia was known for overlapping, layering images in his work. In one notable piece, this piece no longer exists, he attached a stuffed animal to a canvas and declared it simultaneously a portrait of Cézanne, Renoir, Rembrandt, challenging the traditional notion of artistic genius. From the beginning of modernism, beginning with Manet, artists took an anti-establishment stance. These avant-garde creators positioned themselves at the forefront of a movement that was questioning cultural convention, declaring it all as absurd. New objectivity emerged during a pivotal time in history. World War I ended in 1919, only to be followed by the Spanish flu. People were dying everywhere around the world as they tried to recover from the aftermath of war. How did artists subjectively react to this turbulent time? How did they process the spirit of their time, the zeitgeist? What was it? They developed an objective way of looking at it. This movement is called the Neue Sachlichkeit in German, translated as the new objectivity. These artists sought to reject romantic idealism of expressionism in favor of seeing the world more objectively, without beautifying it. This was a harsh time, and people were impoverished and living in war-torn areas. The artists wanted to engage with this reality in practical terms. Otto Dix, a prominent figure in this movement, painted what he saw: sick, depressed, unhappy people who had survived both the war and pandemic. As an artist, he took an objective view of his subjects. Some were, for example, a portrait of Hans Koch, who was a gynecologist. In this portrait, Koch sits with medical stirrups visible in the background, holding a long needle containing an eerily green, toxic-looking serum. Strange items appear in the background, possible IV drips and mysterious vials. Though the Dr. Koch appears unsettled with his facial scar and piercing eyes, this wasn't meant to suggest he was a poor doctor. Rather, he was reflecting the reality of post-war life. People were scared, both literally and figuratively. There was fear. Although Dr. Koch might not appear to be a warm, approachable gynecologist, although he probably is, the portrait intentionally communicates something more important: the cold, distant relationship between doctor and patient during this era. It raises questions about trust in the medical profession during such difficult times. Otto Dix focused on doctors was not coincidental. He was exploring human relationships, particularly regarding medicine and technology and their advancements. Though these portraits were commissioned by the doctors themselves, they retain an undeniable, unsettling quality. The Roaring Twenties marked a time of transformation. As people emerged from difficult times, their worldviews shifted. Many people began saying things like, "I'm not interested in what's happening in the world outside. I'm more focused on what's going on in my own head. There's enough material there without looking outside." The Surrealists were particularly influenced by psychology, especially figures like Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung. Freud explored sexuality, repression, the Oedipus complex, and the impact of childhood experiences on development. Dream interpretation was central in his work. He examined human consciousness through the relationships between ego, superego, and id, concepts that explained how we present ourselves and exist in the world. Surrealism drew heavily from this psychology, with Freud standing as the father of psychoanalysis. The Surrealists discovered that inner exploration could be more compelling than examining the chaotic world outside. A dream world could be more fantastic or more terrifying than external realities, whether it manifested as a nightmare or a pleasant dream of eating chocolate cake on a merry-go-round. This internal focus distinguished Surrealism from its predecessor, Dada. While the Dadaists explored absurdities, the Surrealists developed deeper into the psyche of creating games and things that fostered new ways of thinking and explored life's elements by chance. Subject-object content connects directly to Freud's concepts of ego, the I, the subject, similarly the id, or our link to earthly instinctual desires, and the superego as our internalized cultural rules. The superego embodies what lies beneath the surface, the repressed elements that unconsciously shape our behavior. Self-criticism, self-awareness, and self-confidence all stem from this superego. The Surrealists were especially drawn to this realm of fantasy. The pleasure principle, our drive for happiness and satisfaction, brought with its negative aspects, including defense mechanisms like denial. These Freudian concepts resonated deeply with the post-World War I zeitgeist as people struggled to process their experiences. This psychological foundation gave rise to Surrealism. The Surrealists can be divided into two main groups. The first group directly depicts their dreams and inner visions, painting exactly what they saw in their mind's eye. The second group explores concepts of chance and probability, embracing the undefined and the unexpected possibilities that could emerge in their work. Surrealists used many techniques to stimulate the creative process. Some poets could cut up words, put them in a bag, and pull them out randomly to create a poem. Collage also became a very popular method among the Surrealists. One of their most notable approaches is what's called the cadavre exquisite, or the exquisite corpse in English. This was like creating a Frankenstein's monster in an artwork, pieced together by different people with different handwritings, different drawing styles, different approaches, different thoughts, yet they're all connected. The point of these Surrealist games was to shake the conventional rules and let chance play a role in the creative process. You will submit an exquisite corpse drawing in our next discussions this week. I encourage you to play the Surrealist game with at least 2 friends. It'll be fun. You might be familiar with The Treachery of Images, a famous painting that declares, "This is not a pipe." This work exemplifies how Surrealists questioned our reality. When we visit a museum and see a painting of a pipe or a bowl of fruit, we might say, "What a lovely pipe," or "What a lovely bowl of fruit," but we can't smoke the pipe and we can't eat the fruit. It's not real. This examination of what we perceive as authentic and real, similar to what I mentioned about new objectivity, was a central theme for the Surrealists. The Surrealists believed our unconscious mind could tell a better story than a newspaper. This questioning of perception, asking, is this really a pipe? No, this is not a pipe, it's a painting. This became one of the earliest and most influential Surrealist ideas. The concept parallels Plato's cave allegory found in the Republic, where people are chained down and watch shadows cast on a wall. This was their only reality until one person breaks free, much like in the Matrix film. They discover a world beyond their limited perception. This is what the Surrealists explored, the idea that there's something deeper beyond what we see. Through artists like Duchamp and the Surrealists, it marked a shift towards a more philosophical and conceptual thinking about life and art. With False Mirror, Magritte prompts us to question what we're really seeing. Are we seeing ourselves, or are we seeing reality? The work questions how we see the world and encourages us to distrust surface appearances. What we're looking at is just a painting, an image on a screen. It's about reflection, looking at the world, then looking at yourself. This introspective approach differed from earlier artists who focused on observing or constructing the world. Salvador Dali is probably the most well-known Surrealist artist, with his work, The Persistence of Memory, appearing on countless posters, calendars, and even emojis. His art explored the realm of dreams, featuring grotesque fantasies and peculiar images like melting clocks that symbolize the fleeting nature of time. But here's something you might not know about Dali. He collaborated with Louis Buñuel, a pioneering avant-garde filmmaker. In the 1929 Un Chien Andalou, The Andalusian Dogs, was a groundbreaking film that explored sexual tension, repression, and subconscious desires in a way never before shown on screen. The film features shocking scenes such as a man getting his hand slammed in a door and then ants crawl out of it, achieved through clever editing, no use of special effects, no CGI. If you are interested in avant-garde film, you can watch this full 20-minute long silent film on Open Culture. I highly recommend it. Another memorable scene that shows a man slicing through a woman's eye with a straight razor. While this might not seem particularly shocking compared with modern films, it was sensational for its time. This experimental approach reflects a preoccupation in the 1920s with absurdity and the unconscious mind. There have not been too many women artists discussed so far in this class. During the 1920s, more women artists started gaining recognition. Merit Oppenheim, for example, was one of the Surrealists. Can you imagine drinking from her fur-covered teacup? The absurdity is intentional. The piece questions our understanding of culture, what is acceptable and what is questionable, and what's considered normal. Frida Kahlo's image is well known today. You've likely seen it on posters or calendars, t-shirts, or coffee mugs. Unlike the European surrealists from Paris or Zurich or Belgium, Kahlo was based in Mexico. Though she interacted with many surrealists through her life, she shared some artistic approaches but maintained her independence and developed her own distinctive style. Kahlo's story illustrates a fact about art history. From her death in 1954 until about the late 1980s, she was largely absent from the art world. This omission stemmed from the art world's biases that she wasn't French and she wasn't from Paris and she didn't fit neatly into the surrealist movement. Only in the late 1980s, early 1990s did her work finally receive widespread recognition. The rediscovery of her work reveals how art history often overlooked significant artistic achievements. Kahlo's art was intensely personal, drawing from her surroundings, cultures, and life experience. Like the Expressionists and Surrealists, she portrayed her inner world and life challenges. Despite being well recognized, she traveled and connected with other artists during her lifetime. She faded from history simply because she worked outside of the establishment. Today, however, her name is recognized even by those unfamiliar with art history. You'll learn more about her story when you watch the film. This film is especially relevant to our class as it explores the creative process. You'll witness Kahlo's life experience questioning nature, artistic choices, and unique interpretations of surrealism, all of which shine through her amazing artwork. And, of course, you'll have a quiz at the end of the film. Jean Miro is another surrealist artist who created worlds that were carnivalesque in their atmosphere. He crafted these realms using non-objective shapes and forms. His creative process reflected the world around him, depicting life as a carnival-like nature through abstract rather than realistic representations. Die Stijl, meaning the style in English, was a development by Piet Mondrian in the Netherlands. He wanted to make art using simple forms that were just black and white and yellow and red and blue. He used the simple geometry and shapes that paralleled the artistic developments at the Bauhaus in Weimar, Germany. Let's conclude with some comments about the Bauhaus, an influential art school that flourished in the 1920s. We've discussed Kandinsky, the pioneer of non-objective abstract painting, who was among several renowned artists teaching at the Bauhaus. The school's creative process drew from earlier decorative arts movements discussed in the Belle Epoque, including William Morris's arts and crafts movement and the Art Nouveau. The Bauhaus uniquely merged architecture and industrial design with art, an approach that continues to influence design today. A brief YouTube video is available to you on Brightspace providing an overview of Bauhaus. In response to today's lecture, please respond to the discussion group with your views on this turn inwards that was first seen with the Dadaists followed by the Surrealists. Both were frustrated with the world outside. Do you think it is better to reflect and to represent the world objectively, or to turn the world upside down, as seen in The Fountain by Duchamp?